guys, welcome back to Shutter Magazine. My name's Dustin Lucas, and today we're going to talk about noise reduction in Lightroom. So what I have here is a wedding shot, shot at 1600 ISO, with almost about 2 stops of exposure added. And so what I want to do is zoom into a particular part of the photo where I have part of his suit, but as well as showing some of his face. And so what I'm going to do is just zoomed into this specific section. We're going to go down to the detail panel here, and we're going to go through the different settings for reducing noise. What I like to do is set the sharpening to 0, so it's not sharpening any of the noise. And as you notice that our color noise is set to a default of 25. And if you turn this off, you're going to notice all of these little blue and yellow speckles showing up here. And I'm just going to turn it back on. Go ahead and close that. And see, it just removes all that discoloration. And I'm going to add a little bit more, just so that way we're attacking some of this area in the sky as well. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the default, and I'm just going to raise it up just a bit. Now what we're going to have here is the detail slider, where it's going to start sharpening the edges of these speckled areas. And if I take it all the way to the right, you can see it's changes a little bit in there, but not a whole lot of change. See if there's any more change on their face, and this will kind of bring back some detail, a little bit of sharpening from this noise reduction. So what we're now going to do is we're going to apply, I'm going to leave that at a default of 50. We're going to apply the smoothness, which is going to take those different edges and just kind of create a little better flow between them. And as you can tell in this image, in this particular part, it's not really giving me too much of a difference if I veer from the default of the 50. So I'm going to go ahead and leave smoothness at 50 as well. But so far what you're seeing is the difference of with the noise reduction off, all these blue speckles, and the noise reduction on. So far we've sort of just fixed the color noise. Now let's move to luminance, and that's where we have all this sort of grain and all this other sort of distracting noise. So as we start to move this effect to the right, say at 50 points, you see how soft that gets pretty quick. And this effect you have to be very careful with, because you can already see how much of the sharpness we've lost just by adding that. So what I like to do is, taking it all the way to the left, is starting to bring it over and see how soft it's really starting to bring it. And it starts to become a, sort of a, you have to leave some of the grain in order to keep the sharpness. And that's just kind of part of the deal with noise reduction, is leaving some of the grain so you can still have the sharpened edges, but nothing to where it's, it's too distracting. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for now. And now I have the ability to bring in this detail slider, and I can bring that all the way to the right. And as you can tell, it sharpened my image back. It did start to, sharpen the edges of some of my noise, and I'm going to go ahead and hit double-click detail to bring it back to default. But as you can see, it just sharpens a bit, but I think it does a pretty good effect. Pretty good effect for their face. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up to like 85. And you're seeing, yet again, on and off, just the difference in reducing that noise, but not losing too much of my sharpness. As well as in contrast, what you're going to be able to do is, as you increase the contrast slider, what that's going to do is it's going to take these not so similar tones, and especially here in the coat where I have these lighter tones mixed with the black and the shadows, as I bring that up, it's really not giving me too much of a change. But the contrast slider works really well in sort of smoothing out differing tones. And we're like very similar to the way that contrast works in the basic panel. It's gonna, the more contrast you add, the more difference it's gonna make between two tones, and the less contrast you have, it's gonna sort of have kind of a smooth run between highlights, midtones, shadows. things of that nature. I'm gonna go ahead and leave contrast at 0 for now, and let's move on to onto the adjustment brushes. And the big thing that I like about these are, is I'm going to zoom out to 1 so that way we can see a little more of this image. And you can see sort of how much of a difference it's done, and sort of just reducing the noise and how harsh this is on our shot out of camera. What I like to do is bringing in the adjustment brush, increasing the size of it. I like to paint specifically on his face, and see it's automatically adding the exposure on there just so I kind of see my mask really quickly. And I'm going to do the same thing um, on her skin as well. I'm going to sort of bring that up. And I'm not going to pay too particular attention to the detail I'm doing with this mask. It's just more or less to show you another feature of noise reduction and how it's used in different parts of Lightroom. But I'm just going to sort of lightly go over her skin real quick here. And just here for now, I'd finish off on a final photo. I would, pay a little more attention to getting all of her skin, of course. But what I want to show you here is, by zeroing out that exposure, what we can now do is zooming into, say, 2:1. You notice in your adjustment brushes, you have the ability to remove the noise reduction that we created, so we can actually have the original amount of noise that was on the face on this image, or we have the ability to add more noise, which I think is it's a great tool in Lightroom, and sort of a hidden tool. Is it removes 100%, and actually just sort of gives us some more detail back in the face without specifically having all the smooth application. So it's kind of like the best. It's kind of the best of both worlds. You see, it gets rid of the color correction, the color noise in this image, but it also brings back some of that sharpness to it. So you can kind of play around with this tool and with painting in specific areas that, say, need less noise reduction, and you can choose particular areas that you're wanting to add some noise back into, sort of as a natural element. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close that section, and I'm going to go ahead and reset that effect that I put on their skin, just so that way we don't have that inconsistent brushwork tone on them. And so now that opens us up to is, okay, so let's say we've done our noise reduction for this one image. What about for the entire set? And that's a great question. And so what you can do is, in library mode, is you can break down your whole job based on ISO settings. And you can pick, say, ISO 50, ISO 400, 800, and 1600, and create presets. Like, for instance, since we've already done the noise correction for this image here, what we can do is in develop mode, open up our detail panel, and what we'll do is we'll create a preset specifically for ISO 1600. If you want to get very particular, you could do a +2 exposure, just to sort of give you an idea of images that you're bringing up. I mean, that becomes very detailed, and all we're checking is the noise reduction. In this specific section, you could create a multitude of presets based on settings for each ISO shot. So what we could do is we could go to an image, say, at the lowest ISO setting, which would be ISO 50 for this job. We zoom out, and what we can do is you see we have quite a bit less noise reduction on this image. And I'm going to come off this setting just a bit. Make sure I don't have any effects added on there. And so maybe just adding a little bit of Just a little bit of noise reduction, not too much. And making sure that we're not removing too much of the sharpness here. I'll go ahead and warm this image up a bit. And so now what we have is sort of the range between two of these images to where we could start to, create different presets. Now the next step you would do, say in Lightroom, is maybe you're thinking, well, I'll use a plugin, and maybe you've downloaded a plugin specifically to do noise reduction to all of your images at an automated level. And that's a perfectly great place to sort of start thinking about batching a whole set of images specifically. Now I have the Nick software Define 2 has a really great noise reduction engine, and it's going to analyze my whole image and picks particular different spots of the image to create the perfect noise reduction. And after it's done analyzing here, what it's going to do is pick out multiple parts of the image. You notice it picks his coat, her dress, part of the sky here, and then a dark part of the sky up there in the corner. And what you'll notice is this nice before and after just does a really good job of reducing the noise automatically. The only thing I don't like about this is once I hit save, then what it's going to do is it's going to create a duplicate of my file. So if you're working with 800 wedding files, say in this catalog, now you've sort of turned your catalog from 800 into 1600 pretty quick. And another thing is too is you don't have the ability to go in now and adjust this setting other than what you've done, say in the detail panel, and see how it zeroed out everything here. So you don't have the ability to go in and mask in like we did with the adjustment brush on their face and pull some of that back. It's sort of an all or nothing effect. And so if you're all done with color correction and you're ready to export all of your images out, I think it is a great tool to use, but it does takes quite a long time for it to process all those images. I do have another solution to that specific problem, and what it is it's a plugin for Lightroom specifically. I'm going to go ahead and get out of this tool, close that up, and what it is it's a plugin in Lightroom, and what you have to do is go to Plugin Manager to install it. I've already installed mine, and we'll go ahead and enable it. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Plugin Extras, and apply this bulk develop settings. Let's see here. Maybe I have to reinstall it. So we're going to go here to Add, and I'm going to go to Downloads, and I'm going to add. There we go. I'm going to hit Done. And now what you're seeing is this internal plugin for Lightroom. What I like about this, before I go into the specific settings of this tool, and it takes a little while to get used to the interface, but what I like about this is when we're done, it saves this action, these effects, as a state of history rather than actually having to duplicate the file. And as you notice here, you have options for luminance noise, color noise, sharpening mask, which is really great for noise reduction when you're wanting to mask in, say, a lot more sharpening that you do to an entire job. So it doesn't sharpen the whole image, but more or less just the edges. You also have the ability to update contrast and clarity, which is quite nice as well, for sort of the bulk settings that you can apply to a whole job based on the range of ISO. And what I mean by that is you have the ability to create different increments of noise reduction, say in the luminance and color noise. You have the ability to increase steps of noise reduction based on your ISO. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is hit cancel, and I'm going to go to my low ISO image, which is ISO 50. I sort of created settings here that I want to follow, but I want those to go up in standard steps up until what I created with my ISO 1600 image, which was, see here, let's go back to the specific settings that I had initially, which are right here. And I'm thinking could probably add a little bit more noise reduction at this level. Let's go maybe 39. 39 is a good amount. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into that plugin, and I'm going to set my parameters from 50 to 1600. And now what I can do is I can vary this noise reduction between the 13 that we originally agreed on there all the way up to 39 that we ended up here. And what's really nice about this tool is that when you're increasing the exposure, like we did in this image, we increased it almost 2 stops. What you can do is you can increase the amount of noise reduction, and I like to do it at a 2-point interval per stop that you're adding. So as you brighten up a photo, it's going to introduce more noise than, say, a photo shot at the same ISO where you didn't have to increase the exposure at all. So what this tool allows you to do is it allows you to compensate for you adding exposure and adding visually more noise to the image. You're able to add more noise reduction, which is awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that at 3 points. You also have the ability is every time you're opening, you bring the shadow adjustment up 10 points, you have the ability to increase points of luminance noise reduction. And I like to leave that around 1 or 2 at most. I don't open the shadows up too much, but just in case, it'll just kind of soften my image just a little bit more. And so what we're now going to do is we're going to do the same thing with color noise. We're going to go in here and hit 50. We're going to do 1600. And color noise, you know, it sort of defaults at 25. So I think leaving it at 25 is great for that default. And then going up to, say, 40, like we chose here, is the highest. We also have the ability to increase it as it goes up. So I leave these about the same. So I'll do 3 points, you know, per exposure jump, and I'll do 1 point per shadow increment. Now I haven't done any sharpening yet, and that was handled in a different article. And so I'm going to leave the sharpening mask off at this point, and all the other settings off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click OK. But before we do that, I want you to take notice to the images that were selected on. You can do this by camera. So you can actually select, if you have multiple cameras in your wedding, which most of the time you do, you can select per camera how you're adjusting this noise, because per camera it's definitely going to handle noise a little bit different depending on if it's a newer camera or an older one. But I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what it does is it did my updated settings for one photo, which because I didn't have them all selected, that was the reason why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back one stage. I'm going to go to all my 1-star images. Now I have all the images selected. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing. And all my last settings stayed in there. So now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and click OK. And what you're noticing here too is you have the other cameras showing up, which is great. It's also showing up my other files, so the TIFF files that I made from the NIC software, the Define 2, and it's showing the other camera, the 1DS Mark III. But I'm going to go ahead and just select just for these 1DX CR2 files, and what you'd want to do is selecting just for this camera, and let's go ahead and do that since we're going through this tutorial. So we're just going to select on the 1DX for now. We're going to go to Plugin Extras and apply the bulk settings. It's going to analyze the photos, and then I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And after it finishes, we go ahead and click OK. And now you have the ability to go through each image and it's showing this on and off and just the amount of noise that it's adding in. Let's see, zoomed in 1:1. We're seeing just that particular amount of noise that's added in. And as we go image to image, you're going to notice these values changing. Just 1 point based on the exposure settings, and you see these going up and down, and it's taken into account those exposure jumps and specific ISO changes. And so each individual image looks like it's getting hand-touched noise reduction, which is fantastic. Turning this on and off. Let's see here. Going to a specific image, going back to our original image here, and it's probably going to have a little bit of added noise reduction all the way up to 49 because it had the exposure jump that we had in the basic panel. We went up almost 2 stops, as well as shadows had gone up almost 50 points. So it added 10 points of noise reduction just based on that, and so it gives us our overall result in sort of more of a hand-touched image. But that's all I have for you guys with the noise reduction. If you have more questions about this bulk develop settings or some other plugins, please write into the blog and let us know if you have any questions, and let me know what you think.